the nostalgia critic. I remember it so you don't have to. Let's talk about the show Louie. Yeah, I know what the title card says. I want to start off by talking about Louie. For those who don't know, Louie is an FX show centered around the fictionalized adventures of comedian Louis C.K. It's gotten praise from both audiences and critics. And while the jokes and characters are funny, that's not what I intend to focus on. I intend to focus on the stories, or rather, lack thereof. Oh, there's stuff that happens. One episode, for example, can consist of Louie going off to see his daughters, visiting his psychiatrist, going on a date, and a lot of times, that's it. There's funny jokes and such that occur, but it's rarely bound to a 3-act structure. And half the time, there's not even really a focus in the episode. It's just random funny stuff that happens in Louis C.K.'s life. Some are even declaring it the real show about nothing. But how can that be when Seinfeld is the definitive show about nothing? Because that's what it is, right? The show about nothing? Everyone says it is. Even the series itself seems to endlessly praise itself for it.
It's about nothing. Everybody's doing something. We'll do nothing.
I think you may have something here.
I remember when I was younger, everybody was telling me to see it for that exact reason. That it was a show about nothing. A show that was finally telling stories different, not being bound to a 3-act structure and focusing on a small series of problems like all those other shows do. That sounds revolutionary, actually. Just a slice of unpredictable life where anything can happen. Wow, I can't wait to see how TV is pushing the envelope. But when I would watch an episode, I didn't see a show about nothing. Because every episode had a dilemma that needed to be solved. A toothbrush in the toilet, losing a car, waiting to get into a Chinese restaurant. These were all problems that had to be resolved before the episode was over. This was something. It was just small things. And even then, they weren't all small things. Getting into a fight with Raquel Welch, that seems pretty big. Getting the Merv Griffin set tricking an animal expert to be on only to have your best friend be attacked by one of his animals, that seems pretty big. A menage a trois? This is a little thing? It doesn't look like it's a George. And the problem was always either wrapped up or had the other problems from the various storylines somehow all come together, resulting in a beginning, a middle, and an end. With Louie, a story could begin or end anywhere. That's how much it didn't tie into anything. Sometimes the story would have a longer focus than usual, but it was still unpredictable on where it was going to go next, how long it was going to be there, and when it was going to end. If it was even going to end, as opposed to just stop. And don't get me wrong, I don't have a problem with 3-act structures or good storytelling, but when a show proclaims itself about nothing, yet it constantly acts like it is about something, I have to ask myself, did Seinfeld lie to us? It almost sounds that way, even when they claim themselves as mad geniuses for their idea. Does the idea really sound like the show we're watching?
What kind of stories?
Oh, no. No stories.
No stories? So what is it?
What did you do today?
I got up and came to work.
There's a show. That's a show.
Okay, when have you ever seen an episode like that? The closest I can think is maybe the pilot, which really was just a day in Jerry's life. There was no focus at all. But as you all know, the majority of the stories always had a beginning, middle, and end, at least one dilemma, and eventually a resolution. Hell, at the time, I was saying that The Cosby Show was more a show about nothing. Oh sure, it had storylines half the time, but the other half could be just him at a birthday party. And that's it. A small family get-together, and that's it. There was no problem to be solved or conflict to be had. Again, half the time. But that's more often than Seinfeld did, where there was always a conflict or problem that had to be addressed. Now before you pelt me with cereal boxes that have no copyright labels on them, let me make something perfectly clear. I love Seinfeld. I still see it as some of the best writing on TV ever. The characters are timeless, the situation's hilarious, and the way the stories did so often tie together I think makes it a masterwork of comedy. I'm just asking the question, is it really about nothing? Because I don't see any evidence that states that it is. So if it's not about nothing, what can I declare it's about? I mean, okay, we know it's about a stand-up and his friends, but what's a more fitting description on the focus of the stories? Well, maybe it's a show about how little things can turn to big things. A show about how middle-class America obsesses over little problems as opposed to big problems. Or a show about how a comedian gets his material. Well, wait a minute, right there, that's the perfect sum up. Yeah, because he always does the stand-up in the show, right? And everything they talk about is something that a stand-up would talk about. That actually fits perfectly. Wow, what genius said that?
we're going to do a show about how a comedian gets his material.
Well, isn't he off the beaten path? Because clearly he's saying the show that it's about nothing. I even remember they were saying that George was representing co-creator Larry David in the famous "This Show Is About Nothing" speech, and that it pretty much went as they showed it on TV. So clearly Larry David thought that's what the show was about at the start, right?
It was going to be about how a comedian gets his material.
Or maybe they discovered that show about nothing sounded more marketable and funnier. I guess I can't blame them. If people said your stuff was genius for reasons you didn't think of, would you put up much of an argument? Probably not. You just go with the flow. Bottom line, when you really get down to it, it doesn't matter. Seinfeld is still a phenomenal comedy and one of the greatest shows ever written. And it's not like other shows that really are about nothing don't get praise either. Louie is still a big hit, and both shows coincidentally star stand-ups playing themselves. Which is funny when you think about it. Maybe the next show will be so much about nothing that it'll just be Jim Gaffigan walking around with a webcam. Whatever you call it and however you see it, the important thing is just to laugh at it. And both series show no sign of them losing momentum there. Whether you think they're shows about nothing or shows about something, they're making you laugh. And I think that's all either of them hope to accomplish. I'm the Nostalgia Critic guy, remember it, so you don't have to.